launch team wishes you good luck and Godspeed.
Hey everybody, Space Monkeys, episode 4, blasting off about Zeitgeist. And we are very fortunate to be floating around with 3 key members of the team today. You probably all know Hutch, Kusama counselor and creator of the Polkadot Ambassador program. We have Mr. David Perry, co-founder of one of the first prediction market software companies in 2005. He's also helped drive prediction market adoption in General Electric, Qualcomm, Best Buy, and the US government. And Logan Seather, a technologist with an engineering background. He set up the 1000 Validators program and is now the CEO of Zeitgeist. Logan, David, Hutch, welcome to the Space Monkeys podcast.
Thanks, glad to be here.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Super glad to be here.
Welcome, everybody. David, I got a question for you. I mean, you've been in touch with prediction markets since roughly 2004. I believe. Oh my God, that's like such a long time in terms of crypto. It's like 50 years ago.
That's right.
Did you back then predict that you would be ending up building a prediction market on blockchain technology?
No. I guess when I first learned about prediction markets in 2004, I just was so taken by them that I knew this had to be a big part of my career, and it has been since. And I'd say as I continued learning and working and implementing in different contexts and organizations, I did see the benefits of increasingly open and transparent systems. And by the end of that decade was really coming up against some roadblocks that limited the effectiveness of what prediction markets were doing in terms of censorship resistance, for example. So I didn't predict the solution necessarily, but I did have a lot of angst over the problem that once Bitcoin arrived and then, other blockchain systems started to evolve, the light bulb goes off. I'd call it a eureka moment, realizing what we could do with an open architecture. That's why I like Bitcoin, because unless people were providing their own payments, basically staking people up front, then you had to use play money in these prediction markets for regulatory reasons primarily.
Right.
And so that actually didn't mean that these markets, you could still run a very effective prediction market with, a sort of a virtual currency if you have really good incentives tied to that kind of outside the system, but you did have to rely on that intermediary to make sure that all those things translate to the real world. And so Bitcoin was really fascinating because we could solve that. We could just pay in Bitcoin for the people that performed well. But it wasn't until Ethereum came along, particularly Augur and Gnosis, was a huge fascination to me and the things that we could do now. And so I got involved in the blockchain world professionally in 2016. Around that time, met Hutch, and Hutch and I have stayed connected. And then when I was thinking about starting another project, had been talking to Hutch, and then Hutch mentioned that Logan was working on a prediction market system, which is how the three of us got together about a year ago.
Wow.
Right.
And Logan, how did you get on the prediction market train here? Because you were working with the Web3 Foundation before?
Yeah, I guess it goes back to when I first jumped down the rabbit hole of blockchain in general. I'd heard about Bitcoin and kind of played around with it a bit in 2015, but didn't have this revelation moment until about a year and a half later, when again for some reason Ethereum popped up on my radar. And yeah, I just had a huge revelation that this was such a momentous technology. So just started doing research. One of the projects that captivated me was Augur at the time. Just was really interested by the mechanism of prediction markets and the ability to get the information about future events. It was just a really nice kind of marriage between something that you would think is purely financial with getting something a bit more subjective, right? Like a prediction on something. Each person has their own knowledge and information. And using the prediction market to basically just get that information into the open was just a super captivating idea.
Was Augur your first experience with this idea of prediction markets being used to collate this information?
Yeah, so I was kind of brought to prediction markets through blockchain.
Nice. And how about for you, Hutch? When you were wrapping your head around all this, what was it that made it really click for you and made you want to dedicate all your time to realizing this vision?
I kind of followed the same path that Logan followed in that I discovered prediction markets back whenever Augur was kind of popular. And I really got a chance to join the Ethereum community almost from day one. I wasn't there for the launch of everything, but I found out about the kind of DAO happening with Ethereum in the early days on a Bitcoin Talk forum. So I was pretty deep in the Bitcoin Talk forums at that point. So I got to experience everything from the kind of the very beginning of Ethereum. And I first learned about prediction markets whenever Augur was kind of making its rounds about, and people were really excited about the potential for it. I even, got to try out the platform a little bit. But prediction markets kind of fell off my radar for the next 3 or 4 years. I did community management for an Ethereum startup, which was focused on private messaging and building in a wallet and browser into the same app. It's called Status. And then went on to work at Web3 Foundation, where, like you were saying earlier, I was building the community for Polkadot. But yeah, really it was at the beginning of this year when it was kind of a serendipitous moment whenever I started talking to David again. We were just friends, and I just had a conversation with him. I was like, man, what is missing in the Polkadot and Kusama ecosystems right now? And he was like, well, prediction markets, like this is something that's not a thing. And so Logan was actually working on this in the background. I didn't know. I mean, I knew personally Logan at the foundation, and we collaborated together as colleagues, but I didn't know that he was working kind of in stealth on this project for prediction markets. So I had already had this conversation with David, and then Logan kind of announced that he was leaving the foundation. I said, hey man, what's going on? Let's set up a call. And found out he was working on this. So what really piqued my interest after just kind of it was a really good kind of moment for us all to come together and work on this, is that something that's been on my mind for quite a while is the kind of final frontier of blockchain, which I believe is governance. I think the future and the kind of it's become my opinion that with something like Bitcoin, that they're kind of like bedrock governance that isn't very easy to change, and you kind of have to go through a BIP, and then the nodes have to accept it, and kind of that's the way that upgrades happen in Bitcoin. I just don't think that that's the future of a technology that needs to change and adapt and upgrade a lot. So it's really become my opinion that governance is kind of this final thing that we need to have done proper across different blockchain networks. And the mechanism for prediction markets to actually improve governance on not only DAOs, but just I guess you can consider blockchain networks with on-chain governance now, like these meta DAOs too, right? That's really what brought me further into the fold, is like kind of my feeling and need and the ambition to help add new governance mechanisms to improve governance, because it's my opinion also that there is no perfect governance mechanism. You just can't find the perfect governance mechanism, but we can employ lots of different kind of mechanisms that can hopefully equal to a better solution than the ones that exist now.
Where would you see the pain points of existing systems or the systems on Ethereum a few years back? And where are we today, and which problems do you specifically change with Zeitgeist right now?
The regulatory environment and concerns with around that, and just the lack of clarity. It's not so much that prediction markets, there's been rules against them explicitly, but there haven't been explicit allowances, or the regulatory environment is just gray. And so you have the CFTC in the U.S. that would oversee prediction markets and has granted licenses to a few projects, has also granted no action letters to a few projects. But the regulatory concerns have always just been this kind of big bag of uncertainty and various ambiguities. And so that's a challenge. A challenge is also in the implementation and operation of prediction markets, that's done well, and really in designing the game, the incentive structure, and the really tight contracts with language that's not ambiguous. It's not going to cause confusion or fights at the end of the contract length where people are now in disagreement over what the contract means and whether it was satisfied or not. There's been a decent amount of consternation over that, when it's not done well. And
what is the one single biggest issue that you see in prediction markets, and which is not being solved by anyone out there?
Yeah, great question. I'd say perhaps most of the prediction market applications that you see out there right now, and there's been a lot of great work done. Really looking forward to this space. It's growing rapidly, and we're seeing a lot of wonderful things happen. But I'd say by and large, a lot of these things can be summed up as betting exchanges, and there's not a thing wrong with that. I mean, that's one way to characterize a prediction market, but that really shortchanges the value of a prediction market when you just have it as a betting exchange versus accounting for the cost and value of information. The value here is having a question that you really want answered and you're willing to pay for that, and offer incentives for people to come tell you. And yes, there is speculation where people who know or think that they know will trade an asset back and forth until you have a consensus estimate on that answer. But if there's anything that I would encourage people, maybe caution people to do, it would be to really drill into the information value of the prediction markets versus just providing a platform for people to trade these assets back and forth.
So the information is so valuable, but I wonder on the regulation front, is that something we can solve, or are we always going to be up against regulatory scrutiny?
Well, that's a good question, and I'm not a lawyer. I have kind of a layperson's perspective on this, but I have watched this space for quite a while, and I'm familiar with some efforts seeking regulation or different approaches to bring different market centers to fruition. And I'm optimistic. I think that given the speed that crypto is moving, particularly DeFi, I think that's just inevitable that these systems are coming. And I think many people, myself included, would consider that the U.S. is, fairly slow relative to some other jurisdictions around the world. So, it's going to be a matter of people saying, okay, well, we'd love to be in the U.S., but for right now, and while things are ambiguous, we're going to work somewhere else and continue to lobby and speak with and encourage the U.S. government in sensible oversight. I think what they're afraid of is just people having this kind of Wild West market where they really do want to protect the participants, that they're not being taken advantage of, and that there's the right disclosures as far as the risks go. But the bar is getting lower. I think that's something that we're not able to announce right now, and we don't have a plan for when we'll announce that. But we're actively doing work in different regulatory environments, and it's just a process that takes as long as it takes. But we see some fairly efficient pass through, so we're but we do think that ultimately openness wins, and so decentralized systems will prevail.
Yeah, the mechanism that Zeitgeist will upgrade via are the prediction markets themselves, which in and of itself, that's it's a pretty decentralized kind of mechanism. Right. It's the actual market is upgrading the chain, is dictating the future of this network and this system. So
can you give an example of how that would look to the average user?
Yeah, for sure. So probably the simplest example is a code audit. Will there be bugs found in a code release that has these kinds of upgrades by this date, and then putting a market to that, right? So If it's yes, then and yes is the majority, super majority, and that side kind of wins, then the release will probably be delayed and not implemented.
Yeah, I mean, that's like the classic example we use a lot because it's pretty practical. People can understand like a prediction market on whether or not a bug is found, which would delay a runtime upgrade if like it trades above, let's say, 60% yes for the week preceding the upgrade. So that's one example that we use. There are other examples. Like what's important is to pick a metric that you want this governance proposal to change. So like a couple other metrics that you could pick would be daily average transactions, for instance. So you could put up a prediction market that predicts will the daily average transactions exceed some X amount after this runtime upgrade. And then people can predict whether or not that runtime upgrade makes the chain more usable or user-friendly or just encourages more activity on the chain.
I got a question towards that. Like, how can you prevent manipulation in this system? Like, let's say I put up a prediction market when my first Cow's DAO ape is going to sell for above 200 Kusamas. And I predict that it's going to be in February, because in February, I know a whale who's going to buy it, for example. How can you save the other people getting into this market from me scamming them because I'm playing fiddle behind the scenes?
So one aspect would be like liquidity, right? Like in order for people to trade on that, they need liquidity. So if it's just the person who knows the answer who's providing the liquidity, they won't actually end up being any better off than they were before. I mean, this also plays into a bit just the nature of what a prediction market is doing. Prediction markets are providing incentive for the information to emerge, like for the person who knows the information to provide that information. So if it's a market where it's like you'll sell this NFT in February, and you know because essentially you've created a deal, then you stand to profit in that market as long as others have provided liquidity to that market. If you basically tell your information, right, by buying the yes outcome to that market.
With larger amounts.
Yeah, like you would be incentivized to basically buy it up to 100%.
Yeah.
Oh, right. He would buy up to 100% the liquidity he provided himself. So that's what you mean he's no better off, right?
Right. Like if you're providing the liquidity, then you're kind of just, you're the one who put the money in the first place. So you're basically just shuffling money around. You're not making any money. You would need, like, other people would have to come and want to participate in this market. So you might get some people that, they're just looking at different markets and they might throw some money here, throw some money there. But if there's no one who has or thinks they have confident information, there just wouldn't be liquidity in this market.
There's another kind of manipulation that's often talked about in the context of prediction markets. And so what happens if, let's say you have an election contest and you have the candidates in the market and there's a candidate that you like that, independent of what polls say or what you may know about the status of the election, that you just really want, because of this market, you want the perception that they're doing well. So you're just going to go ahead and manipulate this price so that there's this perception out there that your preferred candidate's winning. And so we would call this a noise trader versus someone acting rationally and in a self-aware way, making their trading decisions. And so there's been a decent amount of research done on this, both empirically and in the lab. One paper in particular called "Manipulators Increase Information Market Accuracy" by Robin Hanson and Ryan Aprea. Robin happens to be the forefather of prediction markets. So it's basically a strategy that's a losing strategy because you're giving away free money. And so to the extent that the market, people are aware of this market and there's liquidity, you can give away free money all you want to, but the rational traders are just going to come in and take that for as long as you feel like giving it away. So you may have a short-term effect on the price, which you can also counter when you're reporting to smooth those things out. If you're making a decision on it, you don't have to necessarily worry about manipulators like that. But ultimately, those those kinds of people get taken out by the people acting rationally.
Now, we know not every prediction market is the same. Could you introduce us to some of the markets you guys are building on Zeitgeist?
One kind of market is a binary market where you have a yes and a no. So you could ask a question of will this event happen, and then people are selecting a yes or no side. You can also do that in a multi-outcome way, saying which one of these 5 candidates will get the nomination, and so you can have a market in those 5. And also scaled where you could say, well, how many seats will this particular party win in the election, and then the price corresponds with a seat. So like this contract pays $1 for every seat that this party wins in the election, for example. But what's vastly more valuable from an information value point of view is decision contingent outcomes, and this is where futarchy comes in. And so also called decision markets, where you can have a market that is basically composable. So you have many markets, each with their own bid and ask, but you can link these things together that say, hey, I have a market on people running for an election, as well as what that election outcome will be. Let's just say in the U.S., it's will a Democrat or Republican win? And then for each party, you have 5 nominees to get that to actually go into the general election. And so for each of these 5 nominees, you could say, well, what's the probability? The thing that I want to know is who's going to win the election, but I want to know contingent on which nominee wins the nomination. And so you can get a price for, hey, if here's maybe a popular person within this party, but they actually don't have the support in the general election to win. So you can now make your decision based on, hey, here's the candidate everybody likes, but here's the candidate that if they get nominated, they're more likely to win. And so that is from an information point of view, in terms of people looking at what is happening in these prediction markets. Like I said, vastly more powerful and valuable than just kind of a binary market, because you could look at, let's say you have a very large, important, expensive issue, and you're trading on it in a binary way, like, hey, will this project launch, and I've got $100 million riding on it, and then the market's telling you no, and you're like, okay, well, I believe the markets, they're calibrated, they're accurate. Okay, now why? What can I do? I've got 8 months to, change something so that I can, I want this project to go live, to be successful. And so futarchy gives you that information.
That's fascinating. Hutch, I saw you post on Twitter that Zeitgeist is going to change the future of DAOs, I think you said. I'm wondering how this product is going to be used by people in the very beginning, especially people who are trying to fit together decentralized autonomous organizations and are trying to figure out what that even means.
Yeah, it's a really good question. And to say that, like, prediction markets could actually influence policy decisions on super large pools of funds, right? So you could imagine that a treasury, like, it doesn't have to be the Kusama or Polkadot treasury, but that would be nice, has a question on how to make a policy decision on something to do with the pool of funds that a prediction market can provide a good answer to. That's one way that I think that I could see if implemented correctly, and if, like, the social consensus was like, we're going to follow what this market decision is, I could see how that could be one way that it could influence.
Are you guys going to have tools specific to DAOs built into the product in the very beginning?
So we probably won't have like a full suite of tools for DAOs at launch. For instance, what we're focusing on first is the prediction market primitives. So we have 3 different classes of prediction markets that we want to enable with Zeitgeist. These are the categorical market, which is trading outcomes on different categories, whether these are people in an election or horses in a race. There's the scalar markets, which trade ranges of numbers. So you could say, like, what will Bitcoin trade at on this date? And then the range is $0 to $100,000. And then, yeah, as David mentioned earlier, the composable markets, which is really where things get interesting. This is kind of like the first base layer that we're focusing on, as well as kind of the dispute mechanism as well, which we have a decentralized court, which secures the oracle results. A lot of the markets will trade on outside world predictions. We need a way to get the result afterward. So an oracle to submit the result, and then we can have different types of oracles. But we also need to secure those results with the court. So that's like the base layer that we'll have at launch, and then from there, so going to post launch, we're going to start working on first futarchy tools for Zeitgeist itself, so that we can govern Zeitgeist according to futarchy, and then branching out from there. One thing that is on the top of the list, since we have cross-chain communication on Kusama, we can enable, if another parachain opts into it and chooses to kind of follow Zeitgeist's lead into on-chain futarchy, they could use Zeitgeist to opt into that.
Could you try to explain to my grandma or my 7-year-old daughter what futarchy is in a 1 minute rundown?
Futarchy is really just prediction market based governance. So using the signal and information we can extract using a prediction market to inform, or in certain cases to enforce, a governance decision.
First time I heard the word futarchy was Gavin Wood said it in a 2018 Sub-Zero or something like that. It seems like it's kind of growing in Zeitgeist and potentially it can take over the rest of the ecosystem, eh?
Yeah, what's really interesting to me too about futarchy is it's not something that's kind of tucked away in a lab, as David's put it before. It's a real mechanism that can work.
So how is the beta going? Are you finding that users are wrapping their head around these concepts?
Yeah, so overall, we've been super excited about the response we've gotten to the beta. So we were working on it for a while. One thing we prioritized was usability and making it as optimized for a user as possible. So we were hoping when we launched it, we would see activity on it. Still, we're pretty surprised that the amount of activity, but also the quality of activity was so high. Yeah, even going into it, I thought it would take like a week. But even on the first day, we saw people creating markets. And it wasn't like they were just putting a random idea in there. They were putting very interesting questions in there.
Like, what was the most standing out idea you saw as a created market?
So the initial one that made me smile, because I could see people understood the idea, was someone made a market on whether or not the U.S. I forget which governmental body, but the U.S. government essentially, would they acknowledge aliens by the end of the year? So that one was really nice to see. It was something that we didn't think of. We did a lot of brainstorming before launching beta, so we'd have market ideas. But that one came from the community, and it was great to see. But after that, over the next couple of weeks, it was really great to see also markets around like Polkadot governance as well, like things that are happening in the Polkadot or Kusama ecosystems.
I think it was a great way to onboard the right people via the NFT drops and how you structured it all. So very, very good kudos to you guys, how you structured that and set it up. Like, you got the right people who got a little bit of depth in the Kusama ecosystem and know what they're doing to enter your beta phase early on.
Yeah, that was definitely a big aim of ours with the NFT launch, and it was also we also wanted to do the NFT launch so that we could kind of throttle the users into the beta. We didn't want a dump of users, kind of like we had on the Kusama Derby. And something that's been really amazing to me, I kind of asked the tech team we don't have any like serious kind of analytics or tracking stuff on our site or apps, and never will. But we have a way to see like how many interactions that people are doing in the app, and it looks like that basically it looks like with the amount of NFTs we have almost the same amount of users as NFTs on a daily basis for like the last 2 weeks on our beta, actually interacting with it and doing things. At least the sessions point to that, which is pretty amazing to me.
That's great. You got quality people right there. Talking about your NFT tarot cards, is there any plans to use them in later testing phases or later entrances to special markets or anything alike?
Yeah, we've definitely discussed a few things. I think nothing's set in stone. Like they're for now, they are what they are. But we really think that there's some cool ways that we can do some things with them in the future for sure. I've even there's a collaboration. I guess we'll kind of wait until we do an announcement about who we're collaborating with. But there's kind of an additional kind of like Sybil mechanism that we can put in place that will allow us to actually drill down even further into like real users of platforms, so that we don't get bot attacked for kind of further incentives and stuff like that. And I think those are definitely going to be a way where it's like, we want users to be able to own like multiple cards of the NFTs, but then we want to also like be able to drill down to like, okay, who are the real users? Like, we don't need to know who you are, Anon, but we at least want to know you're a person.
So I just want to clear up a few things about the beta, just as far as the liquidity goes, because the team has been providing liquidity for markets that I guess you guys think are cool. But in the real world, off beta, if somebody wants to create a market, there's two ways to get liquidity. Either they want the answer so bad that they'll provide it themselves, or it becomes something that's so interesting to the public that other people will provide as well. Is that right?
Yeah. So there's also this goes a bit into some of the research we've been doing in different types of market makers. So on the beta right now, we use CPMM, which is constant product market maker. It's essentially the same as Balancer, which is kind of just a multi-asset Uniswap. So one of the goals would be to make liquidity providing at least sometimes profitable to the person providing the liquidity. Okay. So there's a couple ways we've been tackling this. So one way is through a small amount of annual inflation on Zeitgeist, which can be directed by governance at one or multiple markets or all the markets on the network, and provides like a liquidity mining incentive for the people providing liquidity.
Yeah.
So they'll be able to earn, through fees, but also earn through this network-wide liquidity incentive program. But the other ways, with some research we've been doing into Robin Hansen's LMSR market maker. So we made some additions and called it Rakido. And one of the big benefits is that it's just a completely different model of providing liquidity. So with the CPMM based markets, you have to basically put the liquidity in market maker before anyone can trade on that market. So it requires kind of like a reserve of liquidity. With Rakido and the LMSR, this initial reserve is minimized, and it adapts more to the amount of activity. So even if there's a small amount of liquidity, if there's more people who even do small amounts of trades, over time the kind of builds up the reserve, and you can make larger and larger trades on it.
Gotcha. Do you have any advice for people, interesting ways to look at these markets, interesting ways to find opportunities that you can share with our listeners?
Sure. Yeah. And Jay, that's a great way to make the market prices more efficient. And, as people come in, we love to see that. And other strategies would be we have different tags on the market, and so I suggest to people is focus in on the area where you feel like you've got a particular advantage. Information advantage. Maybe you're really into a particular domain like politics or like what's happening in the crypto space, and start with those because at least against an average participant, you would have an edge, and then. I'd say another strategy is adding markets, and something we understand is quite powerful is people's ability to say, "Hey, here's something that I feel like if would be a good market, and I feel like if this market existed, it could really aggregate some good intelligence, and so using your expertise to define a market that other people might find interesting and want to participate in, and that perhaps a decision maker could use when making a decision or getting insight into that outcome. So I'd probably focus on the areas where you have an informational advantage, as well as, like you said, where the markets maybe are out of whack because a bunch of folks who were less aware than you were came in and made the markets inefficient temporarily, and you have an opportunity to come in and profit off of that.
Yeah, like I will say on the beta markets right now, because I think part of the reason might be there isn't real money on the line.
Mm-hmm.
There's a tendency for the markets to become efficient, meaning that the sum of all the prices of all the assets in the market equal more than one. And yeah, this doesn't make sense because the you can at any time while the market's open, you can generate a full set of the market outcomes for one ZBS on the testnet. And then you can also sell back a full set of the market outcomes for one ZBS. So as soon as they start to sum more than one, or even in cases less than one, there's a arbitrage opportunity just on that market itself to correct that inefficiency.
Gotcha. And just for everybody listening, you have 4 main topics right now: sports, governance, politics, and crypto. Since the last time I checked this, you guys have had so many markets opened here as well. I guess people are really excited about this. I have been excited about Zeitgeist for a while.
I was seeing it was hitting close to 200. I don't know if we've already gone past that now, but the proposals people were sending me and the numbers were closer to 200, so it's pretty cool to see.
Yeah, it's awesome to see.
That's wild. Now, I wonder, is there a market yet on when Zeitgeist will be going for a pair chain slot?
I was just about to ask that.
Yeah, I think someone did open something like that. It was something like the end of the week or something. I don't remember exactly, but it was a time-based market someone opened.
Yeah, I think they just opened it earlier this week. They asked if we'll announce our crowd run by the end of the week, but we haven't put liquidity there yet.
Oh, nice.
Can you give some alpha on that?
Yeah, so I mean, well, I guess like the best alpha we can give is just so on our website we put aiming for Q3 or Q4 this year, and we still are on track and planning to deploy by the end of the year, and at this point it's getting quite close, so you should expect some more information on that soon.
Nice. And it seems like you guys are mostly interested in working in the Kusama ecosystem. I saw a little bit like maybe you'll go to DOT later on, but I'm just curious what you guys think about the current state of Kusama and how you guys think you're going to fit in there.
I think we really had the advantage of seeing Kusama come to fruition before a large majority of, I think, the projects that we're already planning to build on Polkadot did. And we also have the advantage of understanding that Kusama is going to have a bridged, I mean, myself and Logan both working at the Web3 Foundation, we're very close to the happenings and what was going on within the ecosystem. So understanding that a bridged relay chain between Kusama and Polkadot kind of also gave us, this understanding that there's going to be the shared liquidity from Polkadot chain and Kusama, like the kind of vision of true cross-chain collaboration. But I think we're also fans of just the faster moving governance, the more kind of like experimental nature type of things. We want to be able to deploy multiple experimental type of features on the network, I believe. So it's kind of like the ethos of the network resonates with us as well. But yeah, I would say those are the kind of couple of reasons.
Where do you see Zeitgeist in like 3 years? And what kind of predictions would be made on Zeitgeist, and what kind of outcomes would we see in the real life world from those?
3 years time is a long time in crypto, I feel like. So I hope to see that, Zeitgeist is a fully community owned protocol that has, at least tens, if not hundreds of different applications running on top of the network in different formats. I want to see the main Zeitgeist application be something really fruitful as well, but I hope to see lots of experimentation and really the core kind of theme behind what Zeitgeist is a network for other prediction market apps and specific use cases to be built on top of. It basically is providing all the primitives for a good prediction market, and we'll build the first one and maybe the first few ones, but I hope to see it become a fully community-owned network.
David, I'd be interested to know your answer to that question. You've been paying attention to this concept for, I guess, almost 2 decades now. Must be very exciting to have people using the beta. Where do you see this all going in the next few years?
It absolutely is exciting. I think one of the things you're going to see unfold over the 3 years is, right now you can create a market on Zeitgeist, but that's going to continue to evolve where, instead of creating a market that you want, you're going to create a space where maybe you want to have a community, like Hutch said, we want to see 1,000 prediction markets bloom. It's really about, Zeitgeist being this network where you can create your own spaces on the network. To have communities and sub-communities participating in these questions. So, it's going to go from creating a market to creating sort of another space where you can have autonomy to do things yourself. I think we're also going to see, as that happens, organizations and groups, DAOs, people managing treasuries, that will quantify the value that they've gotten from using Zeitgeist, which is very important, and we're keenly focused on. So being able to say, hey, I had these decisions and I put them to the Zeitgeist network and was able to get value out of it, and so it's helped me, generate this amount of money or save this amount. So you're going to see those kinds of things in particular.
Exciting stuff. Logan, you've been working hard at this. When do you lay down the keyboard? When do you know your work is finished? What does Zeitgeist look like in its final form?
I don't know if this will be when I lay down the keyboard, but I think what I would like to see Zeitgeist become is to be kind of like a fully functioning futarchy that actually dictates how it evolves. So how the runtime is changed, how new code gets introduced. I mean, right now and probably going into the near term future, the team and Zeitgeist Foundation will have a big say into how Zeitgeist is evolving. But one goal for sure is to have this be a decentralized network that is able to leverage the governance and the prediction markets to basically evolve itself. So that's one aspect of kind of the meta, like what Zeitgeist, how it evolves. But there's a bunch of other things, I think in the more ecosystem and tooling that we want to do. One of these things is building our app. One thing we wanted to do during beta was to find the bugs, but also to just get a lot of usage reports, because our goal is to create at least something that's as good as Web 2 prediction platforms, if not something better. And then another one is, one thing we're focusing on more going into next year is also analytics, using the activity on Zeitgeist, collecting that data and using it in a useful way. Either comparing Zeitgeist's in the predictions on Zeitgeist to other platforms, judging the accuracy of markets on these platforms. But then over time, developing predictor profiles on even specific user accounts and being able to score them based on how accurate their predictions are.
Fascinating stuff. Thank you to all three of our guests. It was so great having you on and getting to ask you all these questions. Thank you also for building this platform for the entire community. I know everybody's been excited about it since pretty much the spring, so really glad to see all this adoption on the beta, and we definitely look forward to seeing you in the crowd loans. We'll have everybody's socials down below, as well as a link to the beta. Thank you for listening to the Space Monkeys podcast. We will be blasting off again on another topic soon. Thanks very much, everybody.
Thank you all for having us.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Really appreciate it.